Day 1, 9 o'clock. JT and I are going to try to change the EGR cooler on this 6-liter, 05 6-liter. I've ordered the parts. They should be here in 3 or 4 days. And it's pretty deep in there. See how long this takes.
So it is.
I guess we're going to start by taking out the air filter, all the plastics, get our way down into the turbo. We've had the turbo out once and cleaned it, but lots of wiring harness and stuff to get out of the way.
Okay, so not there.
Yeah, about 9:30. We've got all the plastics and everything taken off. We're ready. We've got the alternator off. We're ready to take off the fuel filter assembly and the oil filter assembly. It's all in one piece. It's right there. Looks like it's pretty easy. We've got the lines off already. Just that'll make taking that off first makes the turbo easier to take out. So we're gonna have a 2-minute break, come back and take that out, and then try to get the turbo out.
Taking a picture.
Oil going everywhere.
You're taking a picture.
No, it's on.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, we're taking out the oil filter assembly and the fuel assembly. There's the oil filter. There's 4 bolts around the bottom of it. They come out pretty easy.
Except for one.
One's a little ways in the back. Hard to get at. It's sure going to make a pile of mess down there. Getting deeper and deeper into it all the time. Next step's the turbo. Have to loosen the clamps off at the back, down in there. There's a clamp on that side for the exhaust. There's a clamp on the other side for the exhaust. And there's 3 bolts down underneath that you have to get at. You have to have small hands to get the one in the back. There's an oil tube in front of the turbo that attaches on top with 2 bolts, number 10, and it attaches down into the top of the manifold. Actually, it's the oil cooler, and you need to remove this tube before you can take the turbo out. Pretty straightforward. The bolts come out and it just pops out like that. Next step, get the clamps off the back of the turbo. We've loosened them. You just pop off, and then the exhaust will drop down backwards. I was saying before, it helps to have smaller hands. The 2 bolts in the front loose off the turbo. One's taken out. John's trying to get the back one, and you can see how hard it is. I don't know if you can see in there. He's got a ratchet, a 3/8 drive ratchet. You reach up over the exhaust with a 6-inch extension and a 10mm socket. Once you get it loose, you can get your hand underneath the exhaust and spin it off with your hand. Don't strip these nuts because you will have a hell of a time getting anything in there to get them off.
It's not loose enough yet.
The plastic shroud, it's not a shroud, the plastic bracket that runs along the top that protects the wire, we've unclipped it and used zip ties to just hold it back up out of the way because it's a real pain in the butt. Hangs down over in front of the turbo. Just little things to give you more room to work at. I don't even see it.
Right here?
Yeah. there's a little clip that holds the exhaust to the turbo. We've had the turbo out before. It's easy just to bend the clip up instead of trying to lift the turbo. You can't get the turbo high enough to bend it under that clip. So the best thing to do is just take a flat screwdriver, a good screwdriver, and bend that clip up. You can bend it back down when you put it all back together. Seems to be the easiest thing to do. Got the 3 bolts out, that clip, push the exhaust back, and we'll take the turbo out next. Turbo's a little stuck in there. It's just put a little crowbar or something and wiggle it just to loosen it off its mounts. Once you get it loosened off the mounts, take the crowbar out and it comes out gradually and slowly towards the front. You just kind of have to lift it and turn it, and as John Taylor's in there, stand on the engine and get in there and lift it out the best you can. It comes. Sometimes you might need a helping hand, another guy to help them, but there it goes. It was stuck on the exhaust. Here it comes. A lot easier to take the oil filter off and everything. If you're just doing a turbo, take it out. It's pretty tight, fits in there. Well, there's the turbo out. See down in. There's the exhaust. There's the dreaded EGR cooler underneath. We've still got a ways to go. Start working on the intake manifold now. And there's still quite a few things that we have to take off. I've seen other videos with them taking off the injector wires. Don't think I have to. I'm going to try to do it without. Lift those wires up, slide the intake, lift it up as high as I can, slide it forward and tip it out. We'll try it, see what happens. Having a little closer look at it, you have to take the first wire off the injector. It's in underneath the bracket of the alternator. There's just a little clip in it, and pop the clip back with a flathead screwdriver, and we lost our light, and it comes out just as simple as that. So that seems to be the only one I have to take out. Alright, and there's a heat shield back here that I've heard people have problems with, so I don't know if you have to bend it or what. We'll find out when we get to it. But, that's that for now.
That's too small.
My goodness. We've got the bolts on one side out. There's a bolt for the shroud that hooks onto the intake manifold. But there's another bolt down in here from the inside, which we can't see. We don't really know what it is, so we'll have to get down in there with something, a mirror or something, and see what size bolt it is, because we've tried a couple and it doesn't seem to fit on there. And then we'll take the rest off this side. Seems pretty straightforward, except like I said, that that bracket back there, that heat shield, looks like that's going to be a pain in the butt. It was a 15, and it's the tightest bolt so far that we've taken off. So I was doing it. It's a friggin' 15. I don't know what they're trying to hold on with a little shroud and a little bolt like that. A little piece of plastic with a 15 bolt in it. That's Ford for you. The last 2 intake bolts, there's a little shield that sits up, and you have to get the shield off. So there's 2 bolts on top of it, and then there's 2 bolts that bolt into the main shield that runs down along in between the firewall and the exhaust. Pretty straightforward, and then you're pretty well done. You've got 2 more studs at the very back, and then the intake manifold's ready to come out. Okay, And all the bolts are out of the intake. Now it's just a matter of wiggling it, getting it off. It's going to be a two-man job. I'll hold the wires up. He can try to pull the intake out underneath the wires. Looks like the EGR is still connected to it at this end. So there might be a bolt in there we forgot. Or it just hooks onto it. We'll have a closer look at it. We got a new helper. Her name's Missy. She just keeps the cats away. Don't you, Missy? Yes, a good girl. Well, intake is out. We've decided that while the intake's out, we're going to change the injectors.
Because we broke them.
We were going to change them anyways, but it is a better idea to unplug the injectors, because you cannot get the intake out without cracking them off. Got to get that clamp at the back. The EGR cooler. Get this cooler off, the oil cooler off, and go have a break for lunch. We have to wait for the parts, so might be a day or two before the parts get here. We thought it was going to take us a little longer to get it apart, but it seemed to go pretty well. We didn't break any bolts. Everything came off pretty straightforward. We're going to go test that EGR cooler and see where it's leaking. Maybe cut it in half and have some fun. And then best to have a lot of rags with you, because there's going to be quite a bit of oil underneath this oil cooler when you take it off. Deep down in the dark. So we got the EGR cooler out. Have to check it after lunch to see if we can find where the leak is. Make sure, hopefully that's what it is. Head gaskets don't look like they're leaking, but we don't know exactly what it was. We're pretty sure it was EGR cooler, but we're going to make sure we're either take it somewhere and have it checked, because we don't want to put this all back together and have a head gasket leaking. 3 hours to get it out. We'll have some lunch, we'll get the oil cooler out. The oil cooler is pretty straightforward. Just a bunch of bolts around the bottom of it. Change that screen that's in the bottom of it and clean it up the best way we can. Make sure it's not plugged or anything. And that's that. 3 hours. Lunch is over. We're going to take the oil cooler off now. See if we can clean the screen underneath it. Take it apart, clean it. Put the EGR cooler on a bench and filled it full of water, and just the hour that we were inside having lunch, it leaked out through the exhaust. So we're pretty sure it's the EGR cooler that was leaking and not the heads. $12 bolts around the edge of this, and should be ready to come out. Got the oil cooler out, and there's looks to be about at least a quart and a half of oil down in this hole. We fished the filter out, and just like we've been told by other people, it was missing the ends, blown them out, so we'll have to change that. Pretty well done. Just gonna have to take the oil cooler apart, clean it all up, clean all this hole up down in here, get everything all cleaned up, wait till we get the parts and put it all back together. It wasn't too hard. Hopefully it goes back together as smoothly as it came apart. Well, there it is. The hole's cleaned out. I'm going to get some engine degreaser and clean that all up. And we're done. About 4 hours to take it out. Not too bad. Didn't break anything. Everything went pretty smoothly. And we'll just wait for the parts and get it all back together.